Carrying on with the Enfield, the engine was put back in the frame. This is just the reverse of the earlier video on how I took it out, with a few more crushed fingers and a bit more cursing. The centre stand foot extension had broken off the centre stand, so rather than put it back broken, I took the time to weld it back into place. It swivels on an engine mounting bolt, so now is a very good time to do it. With the stand welded, it was slipped into place and bolted up. With the engine bolted in, primary chain case was next. There's a gasket between the engine and the inner casing. That was put into place with a bit of sealer and bolted up. A quick wipe down and then the seal behind the clutch. This is a new item, so again needs a gasket and a bit of sealer. The seal has to be slipped over the clutch shaft splines, so a little bit of care here not to tear the seal. I find that if you twist it gently it slips over and then can be simply bolted into place. A little bit of thread lock on the bolts here is not a bad idea. With the seal in place, the clutch inner basket goes on. Again, it's on splines, so give it a good wiggle to get it home. The outer clutch basket is next. The primary chain and front pinion is put on at the same time, but I always inject a little bit of oil into the ball race just to help it when it starts up. The inner basket is held in place with a circlip. It can be slipped over and pushed into place quite easily. And with a satisfying click, it slips into the groove. The clutch centre nut was then screwed into place and tightened. Tightened down to 44 foot-pounds. Next, the clutch plates. We start off with a dished plate with the dish pointing away from the engine, friction plate, then a plain plate with no dish on it, another friction plate, another plain plate, another friction plate, a dished plate with the dish pointing in towards the engine, a friction plate, and then the cover plate. Before the cover plate goes on though, don't forget the push rod and the lifting pad in the clutch. With the cover plate in place, there are 6 springs. On this particular clutch, the 6 springs were exactly the same, so it didn't matter what order they went in. But on some clutches you get heavy duty springs and ordinary springs combined. They should alternate around the clutch. The compression plate goes on to pull the springs into position. I usually put a long bolt in here just to keep it in place, and as you can see, I use the hammer shaft to compress the springs until I get the right length bolts to start. Then a bit of thread lock on the remaining bolt, screw that in, hold the plate in position, remove the original bolts and replace with the correct bolts, again with a bit of thread lock, and tighten down evenly. A quick push on the kickstart to make sure the clutch is gripping okay, and then we can get on with the front rotor. There's a spacer between the engine sprocket and the rotor. The key's got to go in and then the rotor goes on. At this point I put in the chain tensioner. It's a slipper tensioner acting on the bottom run of the chain, held in place by a stud. Once in place, the tension is taken out of the bottom run to leave between a ½ inch, 3/8 and ½ inch slack in the top run. The rotor nut is then put into place again with a bit of thread lock on it, and torque down to 5.5 kilograms per metre, the only torque setting I could find. At this point the tape ran out in the camera, but all you've missed is me putting on the alternator. That's 3 studs, spacers, the alternator slipped into place and tightened up, ensuring that the air gap with the rotor is as even as possible. Then the outer cover cleaned and bolted into place. Then the back wheel bolted into place and the head steady bolted into place. Until I get some more parts from the owner, that's it for now. Thanks for watching.